What if I told you that Max Verstappen spent most of this F1 season feeling like a passenger in his own car? What secret change did Red Bull make that suddenly transformed their struggling championship defense into a dominant force again? And why did it take Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko admitting that his engineers were blindly taking what the simulation says to unlock their true potential? These aren't just random struggles from a midfield team. This is Red Bull, the team that dominated the early part of the season, suddenly finding themselves shooting left and right with extreme setup changes that showed they were not in control. But then something changed at Monza. Something that has technical expert Mark Hughes exploring what he calls Red Bull's recent F1 resurgence, and the timing couldn't be more critical as we head to Baku this weekend. Let's start with just how bad things had gotten for Red Bull. According to Mark Hughes' analysis, Monza in 2024 was described as a low point in the team's season. But here's what makes this even more telling. Red Bull didn't even have a Monza-specific wing. Think about that for a moment. This is Red Bull Racing, a team with virtually unlimited resources, showing up to one of the most aerodynamically demanding circuits on the calendar without the proper equipment. The consequences were immediate and measurable. Hughes reports that without a Monza-specific wing, they did not have good enough efficiency when they trimmed the existing standard low-down-force wing. But it gets worse. This aerodynamic compromise didn't just hurt their straight-line speed. It limited the setup options available to the team. Verstappen himself painted an even starker picture of Red Bull's struggles throughout the season, telling reporters after Monza, "Up until now, we've had a lot of races where we were just shooting left and right a little bit with the setup of the car. Quite extreme changes which show that we were not in control. This isn't the language of a championship-winning team. These are the words of a squad that had lost its way, making desperate, extreme setup changes because they fundamentally didn't understand their own car anymore." Now, you might think the solution was simple, just build better parts, right? After all, Red Bull did bring an all-new floor to Monza, and Mark Verstappen did win the race. Case closed, problem solved through superior engineering. But here's where the story gets more complex. Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko explained to Hughes that while the floor update was working well, the outstanding level of performance had more to do with how the team was being guided by Verstappen's preferences. Wait, let me get this straight. The floor was working, but that wasn't the real breakthrough? Marko continued. The engineers are listening more to the driver. If you have such a fast and experienced driver, I think it's the right way. He has to drive it. But there's another layer here that reveals just how deep Red Bull's problems ran. Marko admitted something that should send chills down the spine of any F1 team. The whole technical team is more open to discussing things, and they are not blindly taking what the simulation says. Blindly taking what the simulation says. This is Red Bull Racing. We're talking about a team that has invested millions in cutting-edge simulation technology, and they were blindly following it instead of thinking critically about what their drivers were telling them. Here's what really happened at Red Bull, and why this story is about much more than just a floor upgrade. According to Hughes' reporting, the transformation came from a fundamental shift in how Red Bull operates trackside. Marko explained it's now more based on data at the track than whatever the simulation is showing you. It's more about the experience of Max and the engineers to make a car that is predictable and drivable. The technical changes were actually quite subtle. Hughes reports that the new floor comprised what were described as subtle changes to the underfloor geometry, with the floor fences and floor edges then re-optimized around the new underfloor. The most visible change was a new floor edge wing, but the real magic was in how these components work together. But here's the critical part, it wasn't just about the parts. At Monza, Red Bull had their specific low-down-force wing, but one which was trimmed even further on Verstappen's car partway through FP3 on Saturday. When combined with more front wing angle, Hughes notes, Verstappen had a car which combined great straight line speed with good rotation into the chicanes. The breakthrough moment came when Verstappen finally felt in control again. As he told reporters, "I didn't feel like a passenger in the car as I have for much of the season." And there's another crucial element that Hughes highlights: the role of Laurent Mekies, Red Bull's team boss. According to Verstappen, with Laurent having an engineering background, he's asking the right questions to the engineers, common sense questions, so I think that works really well. Common sense questions. Sometimes the most sophisticated teams need to step back and ask the basics. Sound familiar? Hughes notes this. Sounds very like the sort of combination Red Bull succeeded in giving Verstappen at Monza. If Red Bull has truly cracked the code on balancing these conflicting aerodynamic demands, Baku should be where they prove it. The evidence suggests Red Bull's resurgence isn't just about one good weekend. Verstappen specifically mentioned that, "At Zandvoort, we already took a step that seemed to work quite well, and here another step, which again felt a little better." That's the language of sustainable progress, not a one-off fluke. But there's a larger question about what this means for the sport. If Red Bull has genuinely solved their correlation problems between simulation and track reality, and if they've created a more responsive feedback loop between driver and engineers, they could be about to embark on another dominant streak. This brings us to the questions that will define the rest of this season. Has Red Bull permanently solved their simulation to reality correlation problems, or will these issues resurface at different types of circuits? The evidence from Hughes suggests this is a fundamental operational change, not just a technical fix. But we've seen teams make similar claims before, only to struggle when faced with different aerodynamic challenges. Here's what I'll be watching for at Baku. Can Red Bull deliver that same combination of straight-line speed and rotational balance that worked so well at Monza? Will Verstappen continue to feel like he's driving the car rather than being a passenger? And crucially, can they do this without those extreme setup swings that characterize their earlier struggles? The answers to these questions won't just determine Red Bull's immediate competitiveness. They'll reveal whether this team has genuinely rediscovered the operational excellence that made them champions, or whether we're witnessing a temporary uptick in form. What do you think? Have Red Bull permanently solved their 2024 struggles, or are we seeing a false dawn? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the technical and strategic battles that are shaping this incredible F1 season.